What's up, Wizards? It is Dev, SBMTG with Like It Magic, and you are joining us live on Twitch. Actually, you're not. You're on YouTube. You're like here 2 hours after the party. Don't you wish you were at the party? Twitch.tv/SBMTGDev. Let's look at today's spoilers. I don't want to waste too much of your time. My background's ugly, and you can see all of my folders and stuff. Am I comfortable with that? Probably not. So let's go ahead and get into cards, baby, because we have like 20 or so of them to look at today. And I gotta say, that is less quantity than every day so far in previous season, but it is probably more quality than most days in previous seasons so far. Fewer cards, but we got fewer junk commons and stuff to look at. But we did get a couple, I'm not gonna lie to you. And as usual, we're gonna kind of start the heat off low, gradually raise it in the pot, right? So let's look at my I guess for lack of a better word, least favorite cards of the day that I nonetheless have things to say about. Like Abyssal Gore Stalker here. This is 6 mana, 4 and 2 black for 6/6 horror. And when it enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices 2 creatures. So it's a barter in blood that begets a big body. Hey, nailed that alliteration. Didn't need extra takes for that. I can do this live. Anyway, not actually terrible in like sealed and possibly draft, but looks like more of a sealed card. Sometimes if you're in dire straits, you can always just pay the 6 mana at sorcery speed and sacrifice it. You know what I mean? If you absolutely have to. But obviously the best way to sort of swing the board state wildly in sealed is to play one of these guys, sack 2 little boys, they sacrifice 2 of their actual creatures, and you leave behind a 6/6. So in sealed, I kind of like it, but that's about as far as it goes, to be honest with you. So let's look at Hermitic Nautilus next. This is 2 mana, 1 and a blue for a 1/4 artifact creature that's a Nautilus, and it has Vigilance. You can pay 1 and a blue to have Hermitic Nautilus get +3/-3 till end of turn. So if it's unblocked, usually, you can pay mana to have it get through for a whole bunch of damage on your 2-drop. Vigilant, 1/4 artifact creature. Like, it sounds like I'm impressed by this, but I'm actually not that impressed by it, to be honest with you. I just think there's a lot of cool things about it. Not sure that it ever sees any real play, but in limited, this actually has like a big old booty for blocking in the early game. I like that about it. A 2 mana 1/4 isn't like the most common stat line, right? So that's not terrible. They threw a keyword on it, which is also kind of neat. And when it swings with Vigilance, by the way, if it goes unblocked, it does more damage, and then gets back on defense, can still block after it did that for. So I don't hate this. I think it's actually a really nifty card in limited, but obviously, no standard play on this, but there's a lot to note about it. 2 mana 1/4 decent stat line, threw a keyword ability on it, threw an activated ability on it that might be somewhat decent in like Cauldron decks and stuff like that, right? And they made it an artifact too. So just like they threw value onto this card, and they're like, do you like it yet? And like, I kind of do, honestly, but I don't think it sees too much play. So, but let's move on. Baby Aetherling. Yeah, I like where you're going with that. Just Omastar. What the? It is Omastar. And I am a big fan of Omastar. So let's go. But let's move on to Direfleet Flail. This is where things take kind of a step up in quality, but not that much. But I do kind of like this. This is a single red mana for an equipment. Equipped creature gets +2/+0, and you equip it for just a single mana, just a 1 colorless. Well, 1 generic. Craft with artifact, 3 and 2 red. So what happens when I craft this for 5 mana, right? I get Direfleet Cannon. This is an equipment too that equips for 1 mana. Equipped creature gets +3/+0 and has whenever this creature attacks, you may sacrifice another artifact. When you do, this creature deals damage equal to its power to target creature. This is actually kind of sick. This is actually okay. It's like a bone splitter on this half that you actually have to pay like, real mana for and not just generic mana. So I guess that's a way that it's powered down from Bone Splitter. But it is 1 mana for +2/+0, and it equips for the second lowest cost imaginable. I like that. It's just decent on a baseline. It looks like we're seeing more cards for this like red artifacts deck, which is interesting. There's been a red or red-white artifacts deck theoretically in standard for quite some time now, but they thought that a lot of those cards were going to rotate by the time this set came out. Sorry. Is that the Southerner in me? By the time this set come out. But yeah, by the time the set came out, they were convinced a lot of these cards would be rotated. So it's interesting to see more cards be added to these decks that have been kind of, tier F decks, but they've been trying to be real decks. and then not rotate some of the cards that we thought would rotate. So I kind of like this. I think it's really, really aggressive on this side. In the late game, if you ever actually do get to craft it, then suddenly it gives you this kind of reachy option. It gives you +3/+0. So you're dealing at least a bolt's worth of damage, right? It's not bad. But if you do have another artifact laying around, and you should, if you built your deck correctly, it should be pretty easy to find a token or an experimental synthesizer or whatever. Then suddenly you're just flinging. You're just flinging. You don't even have to actually fling the creature. You don't lose the creature. you just deal damage to another thing, right? It sucks that you can't fling to face here. It's only to target creature, but this is still a pretty decent little bonus, and the equips on both of them are very low. That's what I like about this the most. I'm going to stop talking about it in a second because I've wasted too much time doing so, but it's a single mana to cast, a single mana to equip, and then a single mana to equip the other side. It may be 5 mana to craft, which is a lot. It's like so much, but the initial investment here is like really low, and it's not actually the worst card in the world. It's not actually that bad. So I'm going to move on, though, to Master's Mural. This is a 5 mana artifact that I just kind of think is cool. And it looks cool. I love the art, but I think it's cool. I don't think it's playable, but I think cool points go a long way, right? So 5 mana, 3 a white and a blue for an artifact. When Mural enters the battlefield, create a 4/4 white and blue golem artifact creature token. There's no period in this translation. I assume the sentence ends there. Craft with artifact, 7 mana, 4, 2 white, and a blue. Do the craft stuff. And you get Master's Manufactory. This is an artifact. You can tap it to just create a 4/4 blue and white golem artifact creature token. Activate only if Manufactory or another artifact enter the battlefield under your control this turn. Interesting, you can do this on your opponent's turn, right? If an artifact enters, like if you flash in an artifact during your opponent's turn. Really interesting that, like, in Standard, I guess you could, like, flash in Liberator or something when they go to attack, and now you have Liberator as a blocker, and you can tap this on their turn to make a 4/4 blocker, which seems pretty good. But 7 mana, dude, like 7 mana is crazy. It's ridiculous. It's so much to do. But I guess in the meantime, you get a 5 mana 4/4 artifact creature, and you get this artifact. So it's 2 artifacts, but it's just too much. It's just way too expensive to do all of this stuff, you know? But it is really neat. It is cool that on the other side, you just tap it to make 4/4s. It's kind of cool, you know? But next, we're going to start looking at neat cards. This is Amalia Benevides Aguirre. It's not Aguirre. It's not Aguirre. It is an Aguirre. 3 years of high school Spanish. I am terrible at it. This is white and a black for a 2/2 legendary vampire scout. You might think just because it's an Orzhov vampire that costs a tiny amount of mana, I'd be really excited about this, but I actually think it's a pretty silly card. It's got Ward, pay 3 life. Whenever you gain life, Amalia Benevides Aguirre, I should stop, explores. Then, if Amalia's power is exactly 20, destroy all other creatures. So it's pretty ridiculous, right? I will say, we were just trying to play life game the other night on stream, and one of the things that I said was that we need more life game payoffs, and this is a life game payoff. That's what this is. It's cool. It's a 2 mana 2/2 Ward, pay 3 life. Okay, it's not bad. I still think the card is pretty silly, and you'll almost never actually proc this like second mode on it. If you do trigger this second mode, then like achievement unlocked, put it on your Steam wall, you know what I mean? Share it on Facebook, because it's a pretty insane thing to actually like pull off. But I guess there's going to be ways to increase this thing's power pretty exponentially in Standard. Even if you just throw, you know, a couple of extra power on it somehow, and then you have like the green enchantment that doubles the power and toughness of all your creatures during your combat step or whatever. And then like second main phase, you gain life, this explores, its power is 20, destroy everything else. Like there are ways to make this happen, but like they're all just silly, like janky, like there's no way it's going to happen stuff. So I do admire a 2 mana 2/2, you know, in my color combination, decent creature type, Ward, pay 3 life. Like, these are all good things, but I am very skeptical that you'll ever actually make this happen, to be honest. So, yeah, 20's a lot. 20's a lot. Even if you get there ways other than just exploring with it. It's so much, dude. It's so much. So, let's move on to Captain Storm. Cosmium Raider, another cool card. This is 2 mana, a blue and a red. When I say cards are silly and goofy and all that, like part of me is saying that they are cool. I respect and admire that in some cards. Captain Storm's got that going for her. It's a blue and a red for a 2/2 legendary human pirate. When an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target pirate you control. So really neat in combination with like pirates that attack or come into play and give you treasure tokens or whatever, right? If we see a bunch of those, then suddenly I think this gets much better, because you don't really want to have to like play a bunch of artifacts and pirates in your deck. You want pirates that create artifacts, and I think we're probably going to get a few of those. And we already have a few. Like in Historic, I guess you could play Captain Storm with the 3-mana version of herself, and when she comes into play or attacks or whatever it is, you get a treasure token, right? So that seems pretty good. I hate that it's relegated to pirates, but if it was, just put a +1/+1 counter on any creature you control, it might be a little busted. So neat little trick for the pirate deck, but is it going to be good enough? I think we have to wait and see what all the other pirates actually do before we get there. So I'm not too sure, but this is a neat piece to have. This is a neat piece to have. Well, let's move on to some dinosaur stuff. Ooh, dinosaur stuff. 3 mana, 2 and a red for Poetic Ingenuity. This is an enchantment. Whenever one or more dinosaurs you control attack, create that many treasure tokens. Yikes. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, create a 3/1 red dinosaur creature token. This ability triggers only once per turn. Okay, so little less fun allowed than I would like there at the very end, but still, this is a 3/1 every turn, if it's so long as you can cast an artifact. And I think more importantly, it's a ton of treasure. It's so much treasure, dude. But I think in Standard, if you're building dinosaurs, you want to be like reasonably aggressive, and you probably don't want to drop this on turn 3. Right, I doubt that you want to waste your turn 3 playing this, but in a more mid-rangey dinosaur deck, I could definitely see this working. And a lot of them might be more mid-rangey. I just assume you want to make that deck really aggressive, if you can. But still, in Commander dinosaur decks, this is going to see play forever. It looks more geared towards that format. But I will say, create that many. It could have just been create a treasure token whenever one or more attack, but it's not. It isn't. If you attack with 3 dinosaurs, you get 3 treasure tokens, which is kind of unbelievable. So massively high ceiling on this. And I like that it's not the kind of like creature type payoff that you normally see. They're thinking outside the usual like Anthem box or +1/+1 counters or whatever. And I always support that. They're thinking outside of just like card draw and stuff. You get tokens, you get treasures. Again, I think this sort of different approach to creature type stuff, always welcome. So I like the card. Let me hit the cough button. Too much? Yeah, I actually do think it's too much in Standard. In 60 card constructed formats, you are taking a turn off to play this card, and it can make treasure tokens a turn it comes into play, but I imagine that, barring your 2-drop dinosaur, it probably won't create that much value on turn 3. Now, if it does ramp you on turn 3, if you are attacking with at least 1 dinosaur, I think it's okay. It did something when it entered the battlefield, but by and large, I don't think that a lot of decks in Standard can take turn 3 off to play this. We'll see if I'm wrong, but I think that, using your entire turn 3 to play this card is worse than you think, especially against like mono red. I don't know, dude. I'm not too sure. But if you got a 1-drop dino into a 2-drop dino into this, I mean, that assumes, and I agree, that is a possible line that you could take with this, but that assumes a lot of things, that assumes not only that you got that line, that there is a playable 1-drop dinosaur in Standard. That's the other thing, is if there's a 1-drop dinosaur in Standard, but it's not very good, then you're adding bad cards to your deck to get this line that is very unlikely to actually happen when it comes to play percentages, right? Because you have to get this playable 1-drop dinosaur in your opening hand. You have to get the playable 2-drop dinosaur in your opening hand, or at least draw into it on turn 2. And both of those creatures have to stay out. You're assuming your opponent doesn't have cut down, go for the throat, any number of removal spells to disrupt that line, you know what I mean? Or just a creature they can play to disrupt the dinosaur. If you do get this on turn 3 and you played a 1-drop and a 2-drop dinosaur, is it worth swinging with the 1-drop dinosaur into their 2 or 3-drop, suiciding it, kamikaze, whatever you want to say, like that it's going to die, just to get a treasure token. Is that a worthwhile trade? In some cases it may be, in some cases it isn't. So again, I think that line exists, but it presumes a lot of things, you know. It presumes that my opponent doesn't have removal. It presumes that I got the perfect curve. It presumes that there's a good 1-drop dinosaur to play in the first place. It presumes that like I don't mind just attacking with that dinosaur and losing it when I attack into a bigger creature. So again, there's a lot there's a lot more that's involved in it than you initially might think, is all I'm saying. But anyway, yeah, in limited, if you're maybe. I will say in limited, if you can like, if you have enough artifacts in your deck, then the card becomes okay, right? But in sealed, this has a chance to be pretty bad. And if you drafted it early, then like the rest of your draft has to be all about drafting dinosaurs. But I like drafting creature types. I'm not against doing that. Let's move on to Polani's Hatcher, another dinosaur sort of specific card. 5 mana, 3 a red and a green for a 5/3 dinosaur. Other dinosaurs you control have haste. When Polani's Hatcher enters the battlefield, create 2 0/1 green dinosaur egg creature tokens. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control 1 or more eggs, sacrifice an egg, then create a 3/3 green dinosaur creature token. So really neat. Now 5 mana. 5 mana is kind of a lot, but this is a pretty sick like first line of text. I wish it cost less than 5 mana, you know. We've seen these effects cost 3 mana, and since this one is creature type specific, it could have cost even less, honestly. But 5 mana for all your dinos have haste, and you effectively get a 3/3 on the turn you play it. So you get a 5/3 and a 3/3, and they both have haste. It does say other dinosaurs. It does see, somebody already caught me. I knew someone would catch me on some garbage tonight. Oh yeah, it is other dinosaurs. So you only get to swing with the 3/3 on turn 5, or at least when you have 5 mana. That's looking worse. But it's still like, this looks like an enchantment, right? But it's actually a 5/3. That's good. That is good. I will say this too, like if you spend 5 mana on this and then you decide to move to combat, your opponent can always just like go for the throat and you don't get anything, you know. 2 mana instant speed play that answers your 5 mana play and you don't get value is not good in standard. So if it sticks around, it's really good. But we do have something, by the way, in standard that makes eggs. I think it cares about dragons though. I think it cares about dragons, but I think we might have like more than 1 egg actually in standard. So that's kind of neat. But altogether, this is probably a beast in limited. But I'm not sure that it's quite there in standard. Making 8 power for 5 mana on 2 guys is okay, though. It's not bad. And it makes at least that 8 power if it survives the first turn. If it survives 2 turns, it makes 11 power. It seems okay. So Sunken Citadel. Okay, so as Sunken Citadel enters the battlefield, or Sunken Citadel enters the battlefield tapped. As it enters the battlefield, choose a color. You can tap to add a mana of the chosen color. And you can tap to add 2 mana of the chosen color, but you can only spend it to activate abilities of land sources. It's probably neat in like commander decks that are full of like lands and stuff. But we also have a bunch of creature lands in standard, right? Like we just got creature lands in the last set. We're getting them in this set too. A bunch of the caves and stuff are creature lands, or at least one that we've seen so far is a creature land. So that's kind of interesting. I think this card is probably better than I've sort of in its placement in this video. I think it'll probably see a fair amount of play. I actually don't hate just we've seen cards that do this, but just the first 2 lines of text. Enters tap, choose a color, tap for a mana of the chosen color is already like kind of okay. That's kind of fine. But I think this could have work to do in standard. It's a cave too, so it goes in the cave decks and stuff. So altogether, I think it's solid. I don't have that much to say about it, to be honest. But I do think it's a pretty solid land, you know. 1 copy in a standard deck with the creature lands, I think we'll see. Just like any deck that has creature lands, you know. Especially mid-range decks. Especially mid-range decks. Like, I don't think you'll see this in decks that play like Mishra's Foundry in your monocolored aggro deck. Could be wrong, but I doubt it. But I do think that in like mid-range and control decks, this definitely goes in. I think that we're seeing sort of the beginnings of the land deck. Right? It's going to technically be like a caves deck, but it's going to have a bunch of different other kinds of lands and like creature lands and stuff in it. And things like this will really help tie together not only the different colors you need to make like a 5-color lands deck work, but it'll also make it easier to make your creature lands pop off and stuff. So altogether, really good card that is probably at least commander playable if nothing else. But move on to Well of Offerings. right here. This is also a cave. It enters the battlefield tapped, and when it enters the battlefield, you exile up to 3 target cards from graveyards. You can tap it for a colorless, or you can tap it to add a mana of any color among the exiled cards. So this could tap for a mana of any color, so long as you exile like 2 multicolored cards or whatever. Or if one of the cards that you exiled is all 5 colors or whatever, you can. There you go. If you throw this down and get rid of an Atraxa the turn it comes down, then suddenly it's going to tap for 4 different colors of mana, which is really, really neat, I think. So I think this might have some work to do in Standard too. It's not very good on turn 1, obviously. You don't want this to be the first land you play. The problem with that is that you don't want the 4th land you play to enter tapped. You don't want the 5th land you play to enter tapped, like most of the time, right? So there are definitely like logistical issues with this, but a land that any deck can play and messes around in graveyards just like looks like it just KOs like all the Reanimator strategies in Standard, but there are relatively few Reanimator strategies in Standard right now. I will say that there was a time where this was supposed to, like its function was to take Atraxa out of the graveyard, but we don't have to worry about that as much anymore in Standard. People just ramp into it. So, but I do think it's a good card. I do think that a land that is basically like this kind of spell when you play it is very good, despite the fact that you might have to wait a couple of turns to play it so you can fuel it. But still, the ceiling on this is fairly high, completely deny your opponent's graveyard strategy and like start making 4 different colors of mana. It doesn't tap for 4 colors of mana all at once, but you can choose one of them. And that's going to be really, really good depending on what you hit. So I think it's a really interesting card, right? I like the design on it, but I also think that it's playable, and that's what's like really important, But we'll move on to Confounding Riddle. Things good, in my opinion. This is 2 and a blue for an instant. Choose one. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. Put one of them into your hand, the rest into your graveyard. You can also, if you don't want to do that, you can counter target spell unless its controller pays 4. I'm pretty sure this is a good Magic card. It is. And it's not just Impulse either. They actually gave you a little benefit over Impulse, depending on how you look at things, right? Because Impulse, I believe, puts all the cards on the bottom of your library in a random order or whatever. This, on the other hand, puts them in your graveyard, which is where you want them. 3 mana is kind of a lot, right? But in just the right kind of deck where you want those cards in your graveyard. And you also want the ability to choose specific cards, but you also want the ability to play at instant speed and counter spells. What I'm getting at here is Solar Flare, right? Like a Control Reanimator hybrid deck that existed 10 years ago or more, really, 15 at this point, and hasn't really existed much since then. But in Grixis or Esper, really Esper is the traditional color combination for Solar Flare. I could definitely see this working, dude, especially considering you get your choice. You don't have this thing that some of these mill cards have where like, oh, I lose the wrong card. I put the wrong thing in my graveyard. No, you get your choice. You get your pick of the litter, put the thing you actually need into your hand, right? And then the rest go in your yard. So, the Atraxa has no danger of going into my hand. It's going to my yard where it belongs. So I like that. You can get other removal spells or sweepers that you need. I like that line, where on turn 4 or 3, really, if they don't give you something to counter, you can look for the sweeper with this and play the sweeper on 4 and the reanimation spell on 5. It just writes itself. But if they do give you something big to counter on 3, you've got that. So just like really, really good spell here, I think. Love the versatility, and both modes are like pretty good modes, so pretty sick. Pretty freaking sick. Yeah, it should have a place in the mono blue deck. I could see that too, just because, again, it puts the cards in your yard. So, it fuels Tolarian Terror casting cost going down. It fuels Haughty Djinn's power going up. So, yeah, could go there easily. Let's look at Dauntless Dismantler. I love this thing right here, man. This is 2 mana, 1 and a white for a 1/4 Human Artificer. That 2 mana, 1/4 stat line again. Artifacts your opponent's control enter the battlefield tapped. You can also pay 2x white, sacrifice Dauntless Dismantler to destroy each artifact with mana value X. Remember that this reads, pay 1 white mana sacrifice, destroy all artifact tokens. I think that's kind of a nifty little mode on this guy, and he also makes sure that all of the treasure tokens they ever get come into play tapped. So really neat as a sort of sideboardy kind of card in constructed formats, and probably halfway decent on a lot of commander tables. You know what I mean? So this is probably going to see some play in one format or another, and it's just uncommon too. So I really, really like this thing when I saw it today. It's like smack dab in the middle of the offerings for the day, and I think it might be better than a good number of the cards we're going to look at after it. It's very situational, and in constructed formats, it is almost strictly a sideboard card, right? So I can't really score it too high, but it's going to see play. I'm almost certain this ends up seeing play in sideboards at some point during its life cycle. And even if it doesn't, it's probably got a long life ahead of it in Commander because it's just such a little hoser, you know what I mean? So really good card here, just based on form and function. I like it a lot, you know. If modern removal needs to be exiled, maybe. But did somebody say modern? I'm not sure. Well, you know, maybe. Maybe. I really think that first ability is great. It doesn't tap for it either, so you don't have to wait a turn for it. You're just basically paying 3 mana to destroy all artifact tokens, and I think that might be really relevant too, even in modern, especially in modern for that matter. So, I don't know, man. I don't hate this thing. Like, not at all. And again, in Commander, it's just, you play this card probably. So. But, yeah, because the One Ring, yeah, that's a good point. They enter the battlefield tapped. You're trying something. Get Lost is next in our just a trail of decent 2-mana white cards. This is 1 and a white for an instant. Destroy target creature, enchantment, or planeswalker. Its controller creates 2 map tokens. I had somebody earlier on Twitter ask me, like, why does this card have to exist? And like, I mostly agree with them, but I'm also not that scared of the card. This is another one where, like, they thought there was going to be a rotation. You know, this looks like it takes the place of Fateful Absence rotating, but we still have Fateful Absence, so, you know. I'm not actually sure which one is better, but I would almost guarantee it's this card. I think this is going to be much better than Fateful Absence 90% of the time. You know, they don't actually literally draw a card off of map tokens the way they do with clue tokens, although you could argue that with a map token, it costs them half the mana to draw a card, right? If they end up with a land in their hand. So we can go back and forth on like the schematics, you know what I mean? Like, of everything, the semantics, really. I guess they both work in that situation, but we can go back and forth on the semantics of it. I think that in some cases, giving your opponent 2 artifact tokens is going to be bad for you, you know? It all depends on what your opponent's playing. If they can cash in those artifacts for some sort of, you know, other or extra value beyond just being map tokens, maybe. I think that also, though, from the control player's perspective, on the other side of things, there's going to be plenty of times where you destroy their one thing, and then they don't have any way to actually spend the map tokens, right? Because they don't have any creatures on the table. So you blew away their last creature. Or maybe they're not an aggro deck or a mid-range deck. Maybe they only have enchantments, or maybe they only have planeswalkers. Maybe they're leaning pretty heavily on those. So until they do draw one of their few creatures in the deck, just blow up their enchantment, give them 2 map tokens, who cares, you know? I think this is better than Fateful Absence just because it hits enchantments. You know, it hits a wider spread of permanent types. Enchantments are very important to hit. I don't know which is better, this or Destroy Evil. I think that's the real question, because I've been talking about Fateful Absence. But Destroy Evil hits large creatures, it hits enchantments, doesn't hit planeswalkers, doesn't provide any value for the opponent. Destroy Evil sees a ton of play in Standard right now. It's in main decks, you know. However, if it's blowing up like their big enchantment they built their deck around, their planeswalker that they're going to get 1 million points of value off of for the next like 4 turns, you know, and there's nothing I could do while it snowballs, then I think that those are, you know, more than even trades if all I'm really giving them is like a +1/+1 counter and a drawn land. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's more than worth that trade. So this is a very good removal spell that will see play. I just kind of wonder what numbers it'll see play in, is all I'm really saying. But let's look at Staunch Crewmate next. I really like this guy, dude. I like this guy so much, man. This is 2 mana, 1 and a blue for a 2/1 human pirate. When he ETBs, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal an artifact or pirate card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. You see, back in my day, we had a little guy called Glint Nest Crane. Anybody remember Glint Nest Crane? Really, really good magic card. Little like 2 mana, 1/3 flyer or something like that. Came into play, look at the top 4, pick an artifact, put it in your hand, put the rest on the bottom. So like very reminiscent of this guy. Only this guy is a 2/1, so he attacks theoretically better. He doesn't have an evasive ability, but he attacks for more damage in an aggressive deck and hits more stuff off the top of your library. So goes kind of interestingly in a pirate deck where you find you more pirates. It's also worth noting he can spin into himself, which I think is kind of neat. You know, in the later game after the sweeper or whatever, if you hit Staunch Crewmate, play it, get another pirate, play it. I think you're rebuilding like fairly well at that point. So really cool. Goes, you know, nicely in artifact decks and pirate decks. And we've already gotten a couple of clues that those will be sort of one and the same, right, in this set. Just can't wait till we get the artifact creature pirate construct. That just sort of ties the whole room together. But I really like this dude. I really like Glint Nest Crane. I like pirates as like a creature type matters sort of deck. So dude's awesome. He's a 2-mana 2/1 that draws a card. Really good card. Just on the baseline, 2-mana 2/1 draw a card. Yeah, it's good. So good. And the flavor text is really good too. The flavor text is great. Stalactite Stalker is next. A single black mana for a 1/1 goblin rogue with menace. We're already cooking a little bit. At the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Stalactite Stalker. You can pay 2 and a black and sacrifice Stalactite Stalker. Target creature gets -X until end of turn, where X is Stalactite Stalker's power. So if a permanent went into your graveyard during your end step, this gets a +1/+1 counter. And it's, by the way, it's a permanent went into your graveyard from anywhere. So it's actually really easy to get counters on this in your like self-milled deck, which actually kind of needed another decent 1-drop. I know it already had like Death Bloom Thallid, Gnawing Vermin, but I will always take more decent 1-drops in this deck. And this is one of them. I have talked before about cards like, you know, Skyfisher Spider in that deck, you know. With that deck, the Stick Fingers, Urborg Lurgoy, Cruel Somnophage, you know, that deck. Really needs creatures that are also removal spells because it does not have all the slots in the world to be playing non-creature spells. It's got to play creatures. So Spider was already decent, and this is yet another thing that is effectively a removal spell on a body that is not hard to kind of make big, you know? Like, if you're doing things right in that deck, then like by turn 3, this should have 3 power during your end step. Turn 4, it should have 4 power during your end step. It only grows by 1 per turn, which is a little annoying, but it won't take too long for it to be like a 3/3 menace, a 4/4 menace. And if it gets that big, suddenly it can threaten, if it's not like very good in combat anymore, suddenly it can threaten to take out that like 3 toughness creature, that 4 toughness creature. So I actually think this is a very cool little card for one specific deck, but it's good outside of that deck too, you know what I mean? So long as you are putting stuff into your graveyard, you've got a 1-mana 1/1 menace that grows nearly every turn and can be sacked. It's the same thing, and can be sacked to kill a thing. So I just think like a 1-mana that grows exponentially, has a keyword ability, and can sack to kill a guy, like it's just so much value on one creature. Not every deck is going to want it. And most decks, I think, won't play this. I think you'll just continue to play like Evolved Sleeper in the 1-drop slot in a lot of black decks, a lot of blue-black decks. But I do still think that this thing has like something going for it, even in decks that aren't specifically looking to descend every turn. But in decks that are, really, really good little addition here, man. Like this little guy is kind of nuts, yeah. I'm interested to see what like OK I Scoop has to say about this, because OK I Scoop just took the Stick Fingers deck to 5-2 at like the Hollywood Pizza Open maybe 3 weeks ago. So he has actual competitive experience with that deck. And I want to know if they think that this is worth playing and it is like a 2 of, because I think it might be. But let's keep moving on. Yeah, Soul Cauldron's happy for this. I like the way you think, man. I really do. We got another thing in this set that cares about, like, it can pass around activated abilities, you know? So it works with that card too. But yes, Soul Cauldron plus this, my goodness. And it's just a 1-drop? Like, come on. That's pretty good. You're thinking with your noodle over there. I love it, Kane. Good job. Soul Coil Viper is up next. I'm pretty excited about this little dude. It's just 3 mana, 2 and a black for a 2/3 snake. You can pay a black, tap him, and sacrifice him to return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter. Activate only as a sorcery. Despite the finality counter in the sorcery, I am still super jazzed. It's kind of a Doom Necromancer. It's almost exactly a Doom Necromancer, actually. But instead it's on like a 2/3 uncommon snake for some reason. So yeah, so long as this stays out, it gives your opponent a fair chance of removing it, right? With a cut down too, which is not going to feel good. But so long as this stays out on turn 4, you can reanimate that thing, and that's pretty cool. It's a creature in the meantime, too. So if they don't have a removal spell for it, they can't swing with their, like, 2/2s into this guy, which I think is also neat. But just a good dude, you know? Yeah, Soul Cauldron likes this, too. Yeah, it absolutely does. A lot of Soul Cauldron stuff today. It is interesting how many activated abilities we're seeing in this set. We've already seen a bunch today alone, right? So good catch on that. This is a Soul Cauldron set, and this dude is really good with that card too. So pretty sweet. Yeah, you can turn 4 Atraxa pretty easily, but again, I kind of glided through this point, but I do think the fact that it gives your opponent a turn to remove it, and it's pretty easy to remove, cut down, lightning strike, whatever. Like every removal spell in the format kills this thing. So, you know, I don't love that. I think that's bad. But anytime I see effectively Doom Necromancer in Standard, like, yeah, let's have a party. It seems I'm excited about that, you know. So let's move on to Rage and Hammer Skull, man. This is ridiculous. This is a 3-mana 6/6 with like super minimal drawback. I basically read you the card already. It's 2 and a green for a 6/6 dinosaur. Whenever it attacks, if you don't control another dinosaur, you put a stun counter on Hammer Skull. Okay. It's not Rotting Regisaur or whatever, but I guess it's not even. I think that it's you're supposed to compare it to Reggie because it's 3 mana for a, in this case, 6/6. Reggie was a 7/6. But I think one is supposed to remind you of the other, you know. But rather than discard a card, which was sometimes an upside, but not as much as you wanted it to be, instead it might get stunned when it attacks. But it shouldn't be too hard. It shouldn't be too hard to have another dinosaur out when this attacks. And you just got a 3-mana 6/6 for fight rigging too. Like, how sick is this in fight rigging? Really, really good in that deck. Especially considering, like, if it attacks, like, so long as you make it to your combat step with this in play and a fight rigging on the table, you do not give a solid half poop if this gets a stun counter or not. You just want to, like, trigger the fight rigging. That's all you want to do. So, like, who cares about a stun counter? Not I, said the fly. So not me, said the flea. So I think me neither, said the spider. So I think this is a pretty little sickle card in fight rigging, if nothing else. But, you know, obviously it's good in dinosaur decks as well. So yeah, its downside is less than Reggie. Here's the deal. In a normal game of Magic with normal conditions and stuff, the downside is less than Reggie, but I think that Reggie's downside was more easily turned into an upside. This has no potential upside whatsoever, which is kind of butts. You know what I mean? It doesn't have trample either, which is not good, but neither did Regisaur. You know, Reggie was just a 3-mana 7/6, doesn't have trample, and still you have to be like deathly afraid of it as soon as it hits the table. So it turns out you can only chump so much, you know. So this guy's just like nutso to me, dude. I know he's just like a vanilla 6/6, but 3 mana, dude. Like, bruh, like in the 3-drop slot now, Mono Green has this and Pelucranos and Bloated Contaminator. That's frightening. That's just straight up frightening, dude. Those are big boys. But let's move on to Bedrock Tortoise. Another 6/6. I know it doesn't look like it. This one costs 4 mana, but I think it's worth the bump up in cost. 3 and a green for a 0/6 turtle. As long as it's your turn, creatures you control, including the turtle, have hexproof. Each creature you control with toughness greater than its power assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. It's one of these. You know, you guys know I like these guys. I always like these dudes. I think we should always have one in Standard. Glad this dude exists. He's actually kind of tough to deal with. One of the problems with these decks historically has been that, you know, you go to swing in, right? You get to your attack step. Sometimes you don't even get to swing with your guys. You just announce that you're about to attack, and your opponent's like, okay, blow up your Arcades, you know, blow up your guy that allows this effect to happen, blow up your Rolling Stones, or you know what I mean. So in this case, you don't have that problem. As long as it's your turn, you can just play this guy and suddenly all the dudes have hexproof. That's pretty sexy. Or if you start your turn with this dude, you know, like your opponent cannot mess with that plan throughout your entire turn. And that's going to matter in like Commander Arcades decks, regardless. Arcades the strategist decks, like regardless. So this guy slots directly into those. But what we also have here in Standard is a 4 mana 6/6 hexproof. All your guys have hexproof during your turn. Like, I mean, he also only has hexproof during your turn, but still. That could just go in like normal green decks too, you know, like, oh, Pelucranos is on curve the turn before this, and suddenly Pelucano swings as a 5/5. You know, so like it doesn't even have to go in like toughness specific decks. Sorry, but it obviously could. You know what I mean? So really, really good turtle. I too enjoy big butts, and I cannot lie. You're absolutely right, dude. In it, there in the chat. So yeah, I'm kind of excited about this. As soon as your opponent gets a chance to blow it up, they very likely will, but they have to spend mana on their turn to do it. No cheating. So I think that's really, really sweet too. I like this guy an awful lot. I think he's better than he might look at first glance, because you see the second line of text and you're like, oh, it's one of these guys. Okay, well, he's not good. But I actually think he's kind of quite good. You got 4 mana, 6/6. Not only this guy's hexproof, but I hope you interacted with my dudes while this guy was on the stack, because you're not going to have a chance to do it for the rest of the turn. So I don't know. It's cool. Something else you could do is devise a way to flash this guy in. Right? If you could somehow play this guy at instant speed, he seems dumb on your turn. You know? Like if you swing and your opponent tries to Wandering Emperor you or something like that, you flash in the turtle and nope. Nope. So that's actually pretty... if you could make that work, it'd be gross. But let's move on. Does he eat pizza, though? I hear tell that he does. Terror Tide is up next. 4 mana, 2 and 2 black for a sorcery. With Fathomless Descent, all creatures get -X/-X till end of turn, where X is the number of permanent cards in your graveyard. Pretty sure it's good. I'm pretty sure it's okay. I mean, it's a black sweeper, you know. It's only 4 mana, so it has to be somewhere in the sort of upper half of all the cards we look at today. But is it actually good? You know, drag to the bottom. It sees some play in like domain decks, but not all the play in the world. People just play Sunfall nowadays instead. I can see why. So I'm not sure this ends up seeing too much play either, especially considering you probably have to, if you're playing it on curve, you have to have a bunch of permanent cards in your deck, and you have to devise a way to get at least like 4 or 5 of them in there by turn 4. Which isn't the hardest thing in the world, but I'm not sure that it's worth building your deck to do that just to get this. But, you know, if you build your deck to do that, you can do a bunch of other stuff too, with Fathomless Descent and just descend as a mechanic. So, you know, I think that there's probably like a 60% chance to see some degree of play during its standard life cycle, even if it takes like a year to happen. But even a year from now, we'll still have Sunfall in the format, which will just always be the best sweeper. But if you absolutely do not want to play white, and you absolutely must sweep the board, then Terror Tide might be one of the better options in Standard, given that you can set it up, right? But I just want to be more impressed by the sweeper than I am. But anytime I see a black sweeper, I'm like, okay, maybe, who knows? So it's maybe all right. Yeah, the Aristocrats deck, maybe. I don't know if you've got the slots. I don't know if you want to sweep the board. But if you do want to sweep the board in Aristocrats, you probably use this because you can't use Meathook Massacre anymore. Like, Aristocrats already has the perfect sweeper, but it's banned. So, whoops. Let's move on to the Belligerant, the only thing that I have to make large, I think, in this whole batch of cards. The Belligerant is, as I put these cards together, the newest card of the day. It's 4 mana, 2, a blue, and a red for a 5/5 legendary vehicle. Whenever the Belligerant attacks, create a treasure token. Till end of turn, you may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may play lands and cast spells from the top of your library. It's got Crew 3. So a 4 mana 5/5 that makes a treasure and lets you play lands and cast spells. I think it's fine. I think that this has a chance at being decent. It's not in a color combination a lot of people are playing right now. Although I guess you could make a case for Grixis, you know. Especially in Grixis, because on turn 3 you have either Corpse Appraiser or Graveyard Trespasser. Both of those are good creatures with ETB triggers, and they can crew this. That's not bad. And you're actually not that behind if you play like Graveyard Trespasser on 3, Belligerent on 4, turn 5 crew Belligerent with Graveyard Trespasser and attack. Well, you've tapped both of the things that you played this game, so it seems really dangerous to do that. But in exchange, you get a treasure token, so more mana to cast more stuff this turn, or a bigger thing, or whatever. And also the potential to play something off the top of your library that could be game-changing too. So it also helps you get your land drop for turn 5, which is a thing. It's a 5/5. Let's not discount the fact that it's an attacking 5/5. So you could look at this as kind of a Goldspan Dragon. very sideways. You know, it doesn't fly, but it has an extra point of power and toughness. It creates a treasure token when it attacks, and it attacks on turn 5. That's how it's like a Goldspan Dragon. But boy, is it worse than Goldspan Dragon. Probably. The ability to cast stuff off the top of your library and play lands, by the way, so you're not just completely whiffing if the wrong card is on top of your library, I think is very powerful. I think it's going to be able to attack on turn 5 most of the time without you really having to sweat too hard. You know what I mean? Like, oh, what happens if I lose this thing? Like, if I lose this thing, it probably trades with something good, and it got me a treasure token. So, like, I'm sure, you know. So I'm not pooping on this card, like, at all. I actually think that this could have a chance. Actually could have a real chance. But yet better in the late game than early. You get the abilities only when it attacks. Yes, the wording is awkward, though. Yeah, this, the second thing, until end of turn, you may look at the top card. That is when it attacks. That pops off. I don't think that that's a big deal, though. The fact that you have to, like, wait for it to attack to get the abilities. You can always play it, crew it. You can always crew it on your opponent's turn to block with it, right? The same line we were talking about earlier. Graveyard Trespasser, that's hard for them to target if they want to take out your guy that can crew this, right? They have to discard a card. So Graveyard Trespasser on 3, Belligerant on turn 4, and then on turn 5, again, getting the treasure token there is going to matter, I think, a great deal because of the ramp. Being able to play lands is going to matter because you might have missed your land drop. Being able to cast spells is obviously going to matter, right? So, again, you might have to wait for it to attack, but if you played that 3/3 on turn 3, then you can block with it going into your turn 5. You know, when you say go, you get to block with it, and having a 5/5 blocker is kind of imposing too. So, I don't know. I don't hate it. I think anytime you see a 5/5 when it attacks, make a treasure token, that's already kind of good. A 4 mana rate for that, pretty good. Crew 3 is a lot, but again, that ain't hard. That is not hard to cobble together in this environment. And you get to play cards you would play anyway. You don't have to play bad cards to make this card work. And I think that's kind of important. But I don't know. I kind of like it. I kind of think it's okay. But the turtle can't crew this, and now I'm sad. Yeah. Nice. It doesn't die to go for the throat. That's true. Primal Quagsire. Good pointing that out. It doesn't. I think that's kind of important too. Let's look at Mobile Throne. I see a lot of people freaking out about this. You can really tell when someone is a commander player. Mobile Throne is 4 mana for a 4/4 ward 2. As it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Mobile Throne is the chosen type in addition to its other types. If a triggered ability of another creature you control of the chosen type triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. So let me say this first. People loved Panharmonicon. People loved it so much. A great card. People love it. Wizards is very aware that people love it. So now they printed like 4 Panharmonicons in the last 3 years, and this is the newest one. So quick tip to Wizards, if you do it a lot, it's not as special. Okay? Just throwing that out there for you. But yeah, I can see why commander players are so excited about this. I mean, you just play it in every single creature type commander deck because it's an artifact. It's got the ward too. It's just a 4 mana 4/4, like a passable rate. That's not a bad rate in and of itself. A 4 mana 4/4 ward too, like that's kind of almost a serviceable creature in and of itself. And then when you choose, creature type, and suddenly, all your ETB triggers happen twice. All of your, you control this many creatures of a type, all those triggers, like they happen twice. Good gourd, like, good lord, that's a good gourd. Like, what an amazing Magic card this is in basically any deck that cares about creature types, especially again in Commander. I think it might be too slow for creature type decks in constructed formats, which is partially the aim, I think, of making it a 4-drop, right? It looks like they priced this directly into Commander and out of constructed competitive environments, which might be where you want to be. But when you really think about it, Panharmonicon was 4 mana. Panharmonicon didn't make the biggest splash in constructed environments either, though. That's my counter. But this is only 4 mana for a very specific Panharmonicon, but it is yet a Panharmonicon. You can play this on turn 4 and it gets value the turn you play it. Maybe one of your creature types attacks, right? Maybe one of your creature types that you chose attacks and triggers. So you get an extra trigger the turn this comes into play, Maybe just playing this, note that it's as it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. So the way this should work is, let's say I choose Elf or something for Mobile Throne. And one of my elves says, whenever an elf comes into play on your side, you gain a life. Well, let's say that happens. All right, well, now that elf is going to trigger twice because this guy is an elf when he enters the battlefield, right? So, like, any enter the battlefield triggers that trigger because this guy entered the battlefield and is that creature type will trigger twice. So, like, gross, you know? Very, very disgusting card, I would say. Double Shelly triggers, yeah, just choose Phyrexian or whatever. And you get double Shelly triggers, that's gross. Yeah, I was going to point that out. That this doesn't even have to be in like creature type matters decks, right? You can just have one or two of the creature type that you're going to choose. And they just have really powerful triggers, you know what I mean? Like, let's say I'm playing Yorion. You know, if I'm playing Yorion, then I play this on turn 4 to get things set up. And then I play, you know, I choose whatever Yorion is, Dragon, I guess. I choose Dragon. And then, is he a dragon? No, I can't remember. Anyway, I choose Yorion's creature type. And then turn 5, I play my Yorion, and he triggers twice. Come on. I'm actually not sure that works because... No, it does work. Doesn't it? Does it not? Does it not work? They can't exile twice and then come back into play twice. But I feel like we did exactly that when Yorion was in Standard. Maybe I'm misremembering things. Maybe Yorion wasn't the best example. But you get what I'm trying to say. If the trigger on the one creature whose trigger you want to copy is big enough, then, like... it might be worth playing this in your deck, especially if they're like on curve. So Serpent? Yeah, Serpent. Yeah, with Yorion, they come back at end of turn. That's what I thought, but I just couldn't remember. So maybe not the best off the dome like example, but still, I think you know what I'm trying to say. Just a decent little card here. More than... I tend to, anytime I like a card, I end the entry with a decent little card, but it's more than that. I can see why everyone's so stoked about this thing today. I would be too. But let's move on to what I believe is the final card of the day, barring any reloads on Mythic Spoiler and such. This is the Millennium Calendar. So much talk about this card today because Seth Saffron, probably better known as Saffron Olive, made like a whole Twitter post about it that's got a billion likes at this point because he was like, you know, I don't want to do math. And are there even this many dice? Can that many dice fit on a card? How does this work logistically? And a bunch of people are giving him crap like... it's a perfectly normal take to me. He's obviously infusing a little bit of comedy into it. He's not 100% serious. It's fine. Why is everyone mad? Everyone's been mad at content creators, myself included, the last couple of days. It's not everyone. It's like, you know, a bunch of people will agree, but there's always that one person that's like, how could you have this take unless you're an actual literal idiot? And it's like, whoa, why do you go too hard? You're going way too hard, man. It's just like magic stuff on Twitter. Why are you calling people names? And the Millennium Calendar has been the card doing that today. So let's look at it. Millennium Calendar is just a single mana for a legendary artifact. Whenever one or more permanents become untapped during your untap step, put that many time counters on the Millennium Calendar. You can pay 2 and tap it to double the number of time counters on the Millennium Calendar. When there are 1,000 or more time counters on the Millennium Calendar, sacrifice it and each opponent loses 1,000 life. It's just a silly... This card is a joke, right? It's just a joke. Probably. I guess you can proliferate, right? And you're going to put a bunch of counters on it when your stuff untaps. Like, just untapping your lands. Note, too, that you can, like... There's no mana burn anymore. So, like, end of your opponent's turn, you just tap all your lands. You know, and then when they become untapped, you get that many time counters. This will become, just to Seth's point, by the way, this may become fairly difficult to track. I have seen the take that it's like, come on, man, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, and 64, 128, 256, and, you know, it's not that hard to count doubles up to 1,000, but... However, you're not just doing that. It's not that simple. Like, stuff will become untapped during your untap step to put like weird numbers of counters on it. Then you got to double that. Double 486 in your head right now. Some of you can do it, but for other people, it's going to take pen and paper. You know what I mean? Like, it can be difficult. By the way, double 486, have you won? No, not quite. So not quite, but you will next time you get counters on it. But yeah, this seems like a very, very silly card. Yeah, I think the total math is that it takes like 8 activations dry to make this work, but it doesn't just take 8 activations dry, right? Because when you've tapped it to use its ability, so that means during your untap step, it will untap and put a time counter on itself whenever one or more permanents, doesn't say other. Okay, so that'll change the math just in and of itself, right? It's just weird. It's a this is a joke card that people are going to try and make work in Commander. I've already seen the take from, I think, my good friend of the channel, Hamhawks, on Twitter, basically said, now I have to make like a life gain deck in Commander so I can tank a hit from this thing. And like, yes, that is, the dream should not be to do a hit, to make a hit with this thing. The dream should be to take a hit from this thing, right? And just live. So really sweet. This really should in the game in Commander when it does pop off. And I like the idea. First of all, I like the flavor. Mayan Calendar, I see what you did there. Hilarious. But I like the idea behind it. I like the design of it. It is obviously, however, and again, to Seth's point, you can say all you want to about how easy the math is and all that. This is designed for the digital client. Come on, man. Like, I've never seen a more like digitally designed specific card in my life that was actually playable in non-alchemy standard. It's 1,000 counters, man. Do you own that many dice? So, I don't own 10 100-sided dice, although I imagine like at least half a dozen of people in the chat right now do. So I'm not going to take that away from you. But in any case, just a ridiculous card, and I fully support the design on it. But let's all agree that it's silly. Can we just agree that it's silly? Like, come on, man. A Seedborn Muse helps this. Wait, does it? It's, yeah, untap during your untap step. So, like, Seedborn Muse, what is that? It untaps everything during your opponent's untap step as well. So, I'm not sure that'll work the way I want it to, because I do want it to work that way. You use 3 10-sided dice. Yeah, and just like pretend that they're actually there's an extra digit on each number. Could work. Should have capped at 2012 counters. Exactly, right? Yeah, it wouldn't work with Muse. I didn't think so. I was just making sure. It'd be sick if it did. You get all those like Wilderness Reclamation, right? It'd work with that, but it doesn't. It sucks. But I don't know. Really neat. I bet that it adds up more than you think. I bet that it does add up faster than you think. We're all wanting to try it in standard. You can play it on turn 1, and I imagine that the progression of emotions your opponents go through when they play against this card are going to be really funny, like, who cares? Oh, that silly thing? Okay, somebody's playing that? Neat, all right. And then within a few turns, it's at like 100 counters, and they're like, okay, I got to draw something to do something about that. And like 2 turns later, it's at like 400 counters. I'm like, oh god. Yes. Like, I imagine playing against this is actually more like blood pressure rising inducing, you know what I'm trying to say here, than it initially appears, because within like 5 turns you're like, that thing has 500 counters on it, so if it activates again, I'm dead, so we'll see, man. It might be better than it looks, and I'm kind of hoping it is, and really hoping that it isn't too. So let's reload the Mythic Spoiler. They're usually the best when it comes to like getting the new spoiler cards as quickly as possible. See, we got something. We got 2 things. Look at this, everybody. Let's look at Nurturing Bristle back here first. This is a 7 mana 5/5 dinosaur. Enters the battlefield, make a 3/3 dinosaur creature token. It's green, and 4 cycles for 2. Okay, 4 cycles. When you do play it, it gives you 2 guys and 8 power, so it's not good. But, I've said before that I like basic land cycling, and especially sealed. I think it's really good in sealed, and it's especially good, I haven't said this yet, in sealed environments where there are a lot of very expensive cards. You got to hit your land drops. And we've already seen a ton of like 5 mana plus cards at lower rarities. This is a 7 mana card at a lower rarity. And it seemed like a bunch of those in this environment so far. So it's good to have, even better to have like basic land cycling on stuff in your limited pool. But that's about where it ends. So what is Digsite Conservator? This is 2 mana for a 2/1 artifact creature that is also a gnome. Sacrifice Digsite Conservator. Exile up to 4 target cards from a single graveyard. Activate as a sorcery. When Digsite Conservator dies, you may Conservator. You may pay 4. If you do, discover 4. Okay. Huh. So it sacks for free, and when it dies, you get to discover 4 if you pay mana. It's pretty cool. Is this sideboard playable? I don't know. Like, I feel like if you're going to like mess around in graveyards and standard, there's just like better things you play in your sideboard than this. But this is a body that is immune to go for the throat. It's gonna take out like every card you want to take out, right? Like, pretty much. I think in draft, this is mostly meant to keep people from getting descend numbers, you know, like hitting specific descend numbers. But this could actually be playable in standard just to like wipe important cards from yards. And when you do that, it also like replaces itself. Given that you have the mana, it also replaces itself with something. So kind of like it. The little dude's kind of neat. Let's make James Loader famous. James Loader, what do you have to say? I'm not really sure I understand the Ixalan interpretation of what a gnome is. What a good comment to highlight. It adds a lot. It does. Yeah, I kind of like where they're going. Gnomes are traditionally artifact creatures in standard, right? Your bottle gnomes and stuff like that, artifact creatures. So to answer your question down there in the one comment on this card so far on Mythic Spoiler, I think it's because in Magic, gnomes have been artifact creatures since Tempest, at least since Tempest, and maybe even before that. So in Magic, our gnomes are artifact dudes. But I'm fairly certain that is all of the previews for today. Let me go to MTG previews. I just want to hey, go to the place. MTG previews. I've been there. Did I mean MTG previews? No, I didn't. Yeah, go to the... I've been here like a million times. What are you doing? All right, so... yeah, we didn't get anything new outside of the cards that we looked at. All right, just making sure. So, good spoilers today, I think. All together. We got some decent stuff. The last couple of cards were just kind of fine. We got a zany card with the Millennium Calendar. Mobile Throne, super playable in Commander, if nothing else, and maybe other stuff. Belligerant, really, really interesting card. Probably the most speculative card of the day. The most back and forth on whether or not it's good. Terror Tide, got a black sweeper today. Everybody likes that. Bedrock Tortoise, everybody likes these dudes too. The Toughness Matters, guys. And he's a 6/6. He's for 4 mana. We got the 6/6 for 3 mana, too. That's a dinosaur. Goes in the dinosaur deck. Got a Doomed Apprentice or Necromancer today. Got a Stalactite Stalker. This dude looks awesome. He's hard to compare to anything. You know what I mean? He's just one of those 1 mana, 1/1 guys that grows and has a keyword ability. Those are typically pretty good. Staunch Crewmate, new Glint Nest Crane that also gets pirates and attacks better. Get Lost, a ridiculous removal spell. Dauntless Dismantler, important, commander card for blowing up all the artifact tokens and also does other things. Confounding Riddle, incredible in mono blue and just generally decent in like Control Reanimator hybrids. We got Well of Offerings, which can mess around in graveyards and is just a land drop. It's a spell that costs no mana and also can make like up to all 5 colors of mana. Sunken Citadel, really sweet for the creature land decks, but it's decent outside of that even. Just choose a color, tap to add that mana. Not bad. Palani's Hatcher is fine for the Dinosaurs decks. I think the only card we just straight up errored on tonight, but we came back around. Thanks, chat, for that. Poetic Ingenuity, incredible card for the dinosaur decks, again, especially in Commander. They're going to love this. Captain Storm, really neat for pirate decks. We'll have to see how they shape out in terms of like how much they care about artifacts, how many artifacts you play, how many pirates you play, but still a cool little card here. Amalia, this is neat. What a neat little gimmick of a card here, but still... 2 mana 2/2 ward, pay 3 life. Let's go a little bit. That's not the worst thing in the world. Master's Manufactory. This is where the cards start getting kind of bad. Direfleet Flail. Hermitic Nautilus is at least a cute little guy. And then Abyssal Gore Stalker's a Barter in Blood on legs. What more do you want for your Magic cards? Even the bad ones look kind of halfway neat. So, good day of spoilers. All total. What's our favorite card? What's our favorite card of the entire day? I do like Ingenuity. Riddle I'm going to hate eventually. Get Lost I'm going to hate eventually. I like Crewmate, Stalactite Stalker, Soul Coil Viper. These are options. I like the Turtle. I like Belligerent. Whew, that's tough. What's the most competitive or / our favorite? Those are different things. There's definitely different things. But if I had to pick a favorite card of the day, it might be Turtle Man. It might be the Turtle as my favorite card. Or Stalactite Stalker. It's one of those two. if I had to pick favorite card. What a sweet little guy this is. Stalker, I love him, dude. Millennium Calendar for both. Yeah, it's a pretty sick little card, man. The Walking Throne 100%. The white removal is crazy. It is very good. It is very, very good, dude. But I just like this dude, man. I like his little gremlin face. He's like cute, but also I wouldn't want him to bite my face off. So that's good. But I like these dudes, man. Traditionally, just a 1-mana 1/1. It grows for a tiny investment, and you can cash it in to do something great. Like, yeah, man. This guy's better than he looks, I think. But altogether, them are the spoilers for whatever today is. Thursday, October the 26th. It's right there on my computer screen. Yeah, 10:16 p.m. on Thursday, October 26th. I can cheat. I forgot that I can cheat. Great spoilers today, honestly, man. Again, quality over quantity, but had a really good time looking at these new cards. Ixalan looks like a freaking banger of a set, dude. I kind of can't wait to get my hands on this. Early access is going to be fun. It's going to have to do like an all-day stream so I can play everything I want to play. Just looks like it's going to really impact Standard, and I can't wait to see how the weird stuff impacts Standard. Seriously, I think that some of the stuff that people are kind of underplaying right now is going to be more than decent when it actually hits the streets. So, good stuff, man. And there's plenty more spoilers, by the way. I think we're like less than halfway through the set all totaled. So, stick with the channel, SBMTG, right here on YouTube, but also here on Twitch, SBMTG Dev here, to, get more spoiler coverage as the season goes on. We got a bunch more cards to look at, and so far the set's been ridiculous, and it shows no signs of letting up. So make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done it yet for the rest of the spoilers, deck techs, and other stuff. Top 10, top 25, top 10 sleepers, all that stuff. It's my favorite content of each season. So sub if you haven't done it yet to get all that stuff. Check out the Patreon. $1 a month is all I really ask, and it really helps out the channel, and you get to pick what decks we do first once we get to Rivals of Ixalan? Lost Caverns of Ixalan Standard. And again, it's just $1 a month to support the channel, so that means a lot to me. Aside from that, do all the stuff I haven't mentioned yet, and whatever that stuff is, just do it. As long as it helps, and it's more or less free for you. So all that stuff. But I got to get out of here. I'm pretty sure that this YouTube video is already a relatively long file. So let me get done with this. Let me say bye to my Twitch people, and I will catch you cats here on YouTube later. Not too much later. I'll be back. Don't worry. I wouldn't leave you. I'm Deb from the place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.